So now we are moving on to epidemiology, second part. My reference textbooks are the same, Sobin, Peter, and Park. Okay. So in this session, we'll be dealing with epidemiological methods and study designs. Okay. So let's see the classification of epidemiologic methods or epidemiologic study designs. This is a very, very important topic. Okay. It is the base for everything. Okay. If you understand this, the classification properly from here, you will be able to answer any questions on epidemiology. Okay. And this doesn't ends here. Okay. That is the most important thing. At a postgraduate level, you can't live without epidemiology. Trust me. Okay. This is the base for everything. So just have a idea or build a concept right from here only, and then it will be easier for you. Okay. So this is a broad classification of epidemiology, okay, or epidemiologic study designs or epidemiologic methods. So epidemiology, we can classify it as, or epidemiologic studies, we can classify it into two categories based on whether we are intervening or we are giving an intervention or not. If we are not providing an intervention, those types of studies will comes under observational studies, and if we are giving an intervention, those will comes under experimental or interventional studies. Okay, so that is the first level of classification, that is into observational and experimental based on intervention, or whether we are giving something or we are changing something or we are doing something in with respect to our study. Okay, now let us see what are the subcategories of observational studies. Observational studies are in turn divided into descriptive studies and analytical studies based on whether there is a comparison group or not. If there is a comparison group, it will go into analytical studies, and if there is no comparison group, it will comes under descriptive studies. Okay, that is the next level of classification. Okay, so observational studies into descriptive and analytical. So under descriptive, we have case report and case series, we have cross sectional or prevalence, we have ecological or correlational studies. Okay, I'll just briefly explain what exactly mean by case report, cross sectional, ecological, and are very brief. Okay, we'll be dealing in detail with all these in the coming slides. Okay, so what is a case report? It is just a report of a case, as simple as it is. Okay, just a clinical representation of a case by a clinician or a group of clinicians. That is what case report means. Just a clinical representation of the case that they have came across or that they have done. Okay, and case series is a collection of or a series of case report. Okay, it is a very what to say, very we have a hierarchy level. Okay, that I'll tell you after studying all the study designs in epidemiology. So it is a pyramid. Okay, in that pyramid, this case report and case series at the very bottom level. Okay. Next, we have cross sectional or prevalence studies. Okay, this cross sectional or prevalence studies can be descriptive as well as analytical. Okay, in your park, I think in your Soben Peter, they have given it under descriptive. In your park, they have given it under analytical. In your pulse, I think they have given it under analytical. It can fit into both. Okay, if we have a comparison group, this cross sectional will fit into analytical studies. If there is no comparison group directly, we are just examining a group of people at that point of time, it will directly comes under descriptive. So that is the difference. Okay, otherwise it is known as prevalence studies because it will give you the burden, estimate of burden. Okay, so that is about cross sectional. Next we have ecological or correlational studies. It is, we have population as a subunit. We are studying the patterns of a disease at very national level or international level. That is like we are considering a whole nation. So that is like population. We have a subunit as a we have a subunit, that is population. That is the difference between correlational and cross sectional. Okay, now you understood what is a case report, what is a cross sectional, and what is a correlation or ecological studies. So that comes under descriptive. So in descriptive, we are just describing what we are seeing or what we are observing. We are nothing we are doing. We are not under what to say. We are not going for the reason behind this particular occurrence. We are not finding out any kind of reasons for this peculiar disease pattern in a community. We are just reporting the disease, how the disease varies and how it is occurring in a community. That is about descriptive studies. Okay. Now, analytical studies, as I told earlier, it is just higher entity than descriptive. In this analytical studies, we will have a comparison group. Okay. So we have two types, that is cross sectional and cohort. Sorry, case control and cohort. So analytical is again divided into two, that is case control and cohort. So what is case control? Case control is we are moving backward. That event has already occurred. That is outcome has already occurred. We want to go back in time and to find out what is the exposure behind that outcome. So for that we need two groups. So that is case control, and cohort means we are moving forwards. The outcome has not yet occurred. Okay. So we have an exposure and we will move forward to see how is the outcome, how is the outcome is happening. That is what cohort, or it is a follow-up study. So this is a brief classification of observational studies. Next we have experimental studies or interventional studies. They are divided into randomized control trials and non-randomized control trials. If a randomization is involved in the study design, that is called a randomized control trial. If there is no randomization, then it is called non-randomized control trial. So this is the study designs in epidemiology. Okay, we will be dealing with each and everything in detail. Okay, so just have a idea. Okay, that is why I have explained it beforehand only. Okay, so let's move on to descriptive epidemiology. Okay, as I told earlier, descriptive studies are the first phase of an epidemiological investigation. Okay, this is also can ask as an MCQ. So which is the first phase of an epidemiological investigation? They are descriptive studies, and it is purely observational in nature. We are just observing, and it is primarily concerned with describing the trends or relationship between conditions or individuals. We are just observing and we are just watching what is the trends in changing the disease, or trends in the patterns of the disease, and what is the relationship between these conditions with the individuals. That is what descriptive epidemiology tells you. It is very inexpensive and it is less time consuming. Compared to other study designs, it is very relatively inexpensive. Okay, and there is only one group in the start of the study, and there is no comparison between the groups. Okay, and it is at the bottom of the research hierarchy. There is a hierarchy that I'll tell you after studying all the designs, and this descriptive studies, it's lying at the very bottom of this research hierarchy. Okay, so the results show how many may develop the disease over time, and it describes the characteristics of the disease. Okay, the last point is it generate hypothesis. This is very, very important. The ultimate aim of a descriptive studies or descriptive epidemiology is generation of an etiological hypothesis. This is repeatedly being asked. Okay, so descriptive studies, the ultimate aim or the final step in a descriptive study is generation of a etiological hypothesis. Clear? So let me tell you an example for a descriptive study. Okay, if you want to find out the degree of dental caries among school children, okay, or the prevalence of dental caries among school children, you know what is the prevalence now. Okay, so what all things we will do? We will find there will be number of classes in the school, right? Starting from LKG to 10th standard, and there will be huge gender variation. So many female boys will be there, so many girls will be there, so all these things will be there. So we want to find the degree of dental caries among school children. Okay, so how can we tabulate? We can tabulate it's like, or we can find it with respect to males, how many dental caries are prevailing among boys, or males, how many caries are prevailing among females, or how with respect to age also we can tell, that is in first standard or 5 years of old children having this much of dental caries, or 10 years of children are having this much of dental caries. So we can categorize it according to our variables, our variable of interest. Okay, that is either age, or with respect to gender we can categorize, or with respect to socio-economic status, like to which social class they belongs. Okay, low class or middle class or upper class. So ultimately what we'll get the burden of dental caries among that school children. So this is the purest or the classist example of a descriptive study design. We are just observing. Okay, we are not finding the cause behind the dental caries. We are not finding what are the reasons leading to dental caries, or what are the reasons behind more dental occurrence of more dental caries among among boys compared to girls, or we are not finding any reasons for the occurrence of dental caries. We are just reporting how many dental caries are prevailing among the boys or among the girls or among different classes. That is what we are seeing, and we are just observing. We are not doing anything. Clear? So this is a clear example of a descriptive study designs. Okay, so look at this. In descriptive studies, the disease is studied under this question, using these questions. Okay, just who gets sick and who does not. Same similar example, if you consider who is having dental caries and who is not having, and which rates has got the highest and the lowest. Okay, similar. Okay, who has got the highest amount of dental caries, who has got the lowest amount of dental caries, and temporal patterns of the disease and how it is varies, how it is varying. Okay, for example, in some class males, boys having higher, and some class and females having higher. So that is with respect to what is a variable of our interest, how it is varies according to the variable of interest. That is the temporal patterns of the disease. I am telling it with an example of dental caries. Okay, how it varies according to the variable of our interest. So this is what we studies in epidemiology. Okay, clear? So when you think about epidemiology, just have in mind about this example. Okay, this is a very simple example of a descriptive studies. We are not doing anything, we are not intervening anything, we are just finding the prevalence or just finding about the amount of that disease occurring in that particular community, and what is the difference in the trends of that disease among the variable of interest, and we are just finding the highest amount and the lowest uh, rates. That is what we are just doing in a descriptive epidemiology. Clear? So let's see what is objectives. Okay, to evaluate the trends in health and disease. Okay, clear? No? And it provide a basis for planning, provision and evaluation of services. That is also true. And it to identify problems to be studied by analytic methods and to test hypotheses related to those problems. Okay, so I told you earlier, descriptive studies will help in generating a hypothesis. Okay, so that is the final step of a descriptive study designs. That is that means it will just give you a clue regarding this much of dental caries is prevailing among school children. So next step is we want to know what is the cause behind it or what could be the reason. So it will just give a clue. Okay, so that higher thing we can study it by another study design, that is the higher entity, that is analytical study designs. Okay, so that is what it identify the problems that has to be studied by analytical methods. And analytical study designs, through analytical study designs we can help or we can do test the hypothesis. Okay, that will be dealing in the other session. So this is what descriptive epidemiology gives you. Okay, next we can study in detail about the steps. Okay, I'm telling the steps in detail because otherwise you won't be able to understand like what exactly comes under descriptive epidemiology. They can ask questions regarding, they'll give a scenario and they will ask you like which study design this particular scenario belongs to. So if you are thorough with the steps and all thorough with the concept, you can easily answer. That is why I'm just explaining the steps very briefly. Okay, so the first step is defining the population to be studied. First we have to define the population. Okay, the next step is we have to define the disease. Okay, after population what we have to do? We have to obviously we have to define the disease under study. Okay, the next step is we have to describe the disease under study. Okay, definition is over, now we have to describe. Okay, then we have to measure the disease, then we have to compare it with known indices, and the last step is formulation of an etiological hypothesis. Okay, so the first step is defining the population. Okay, no need to study the entire thing, just see the highlighted portions or colored text. Okay, I'm going to explain that only very briefly. I'll explain. Okay, so the first step is defining the population. So why should we define the population? Okay, the concept of defining a population is it will give us a denominator. Okay, we need a denominator to calculate the rates. Okay, we want to express the disease rates and frequency. So the population will give you the rates. Okay, to measure the disease frequency. Okay, and the population is not only in terms of the number. Okay, we should also know about the composition, that is age distribution, gender distribution, socioeconomic status, all those things in the population has to be studied. Okay, then the defined population can be the entire whole population or it can be a representative. We have to select a sample, a representative sample from that, and that method is mostly being used because it is very less expensive, and it is like reliable and less time consuming. So that is about defining the population. So next we are moving to defining the disease under study. Okay, so as an epidemiologist, we should, or the main concern is to obtain the accurate estimate of a disease. Okay, for example, if you're doing a study on the survival rate of stage 4 cancer patients, we need exclusively stage 4 cancer patients. So automatically stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 cancer patients are being excluded. Okay, so that is what our definition should be, so clear that we should get an accurate estimate of a disease. It should be very precise and it should be valid to enable to identify those who have the disease from those who do not have. So that is very important. And the epidemiologist always looks out for an operational definition. That is, what is an operational definition? That is, a disease or a condition can be identified as well as measured, because we want to quantify everything. We want to know about the measurement, right? So that is what we'll always look for, an operational definition, the defined population with a degree of accuracy. Okay, so take an example of dental caries. How can we measure dental caries? Have you ever thought about this? So we can measure dental caries with the help of indices. That is the importance of indices. We have learned no D, M, F and all. So here comes the importance of dental caries. Okay, we can measure it using various dental caries indices. We are quantifying the dental caries. Okay, a qualitative variable. We are quantifying it. Like we are expressing it in terms of percentages. Finally, we'll express everything in terms of percentages. So that is what we need to define the disease under study. We need the quantity. We need how to measure a disease. Okay. So that is the second step. So third step is describing the disease. So definition is over. So we got a denominator and we got that is population we got, and we got the correct definition of our disease as well. Now we have to describe the disease. Okay, that is description is with respect to time, place and with respect to person. Okay, let's see everything in detail. First we are moving to time distribution. Okay, so we usually explain three different kinds of time trends. Okay, see that: short term fluctuation, periodic fluctuation and long term or secular trends. Okay, remember this word, secular trends. Okay, first we will see what is a short term fluctuation. Okay, the best example for a short term fluctuation is an occurrence of an epidemic. Okay, what is an epidemic? You know what is an epidemic, right? It is defined as an occurrence in a community or a region of case of an illness or other health related events clearly in excess of its normal expectancy. Okay, we have detailedly learned the definition of epidemic, endemic and all. Okay, so we have a three types of epidemics. Okay, we can categorize it as common source, propagated, slow epidemics. Okay, so common source can again be subcategorized into single exposure or point exposure epidemics or continuous or multiple exposure epidemics. Okay, let me explain what is a single exposure or point source epidemics. It is a group of people simultaneously get exposed to a common source of infection. So that is, a group of people, they'll get simultaneously, they get exposed to a common source of infection. For example, food poisoning. Okay, so it can be either due to drinking of a contaminated water, or drinking of a contaminated, or eating of a consumption of a contaminated food. Okay, so that is a common source. Okay, so the people who had eaten that contaminated food, or who had drank that contaminated water, they all may develop the disease at a same, more or less at the same, they'll be having a same incubation period and they will report more or less at the same time. Okay, so that is what single exposure or point source epidemics means. Okay, so they will report the disease either in terms of cholera or dysentery or diarrhea. That might differ, but they'll all report with the same pattern of the disease. Okay, so that is what single exposure, they get simultaneously exposed with the same source of infection. Okay, then what is continuous or multiple exposure epidemics? That is different from a single exposure. As the name suggests, multiple exposure, that is the continuous exposure from a common source of infection. That is, if a person is drinking a contaminated water from a well continuously, if a group of people is drinking a contaminated water from a well continuously, that is like multiple times they have been exposed. Okay, so they can develop diarrhea, dysentery, cholera, so many diseases. So that is what continuous or multiple exposure epidemics means. Okay, that is the common source epidemics. It all have a common source. Okay, next one is propagated epidemics. As the name suggests, it is like propagating. It can move from, or it can infect, or it can spread infection from person to person, or from arthropod vector, or from the animal reservoir. The bestest example of a propagated epidemics is corona. See that picture, okay? From one source, it is going like a chain reaction, and it will form a cluster, and from there again it will spread. Okay, that is the best example of a propagated epidemics. Person to person, arthropod vector, and animal reservoir. And the last category is slow or modern epidemics. Okay, so this is a modern or a recent classification. It is like, once it was an epidemic, this HIV or AIDS, once when it began it was an epidemic, okay, but now it is like continuously persistent in the community. Everywhere it is like continuously, it is been seen since ages. It incidence or its prevalence has not decreased yet, it is still increasing. So that is what slow or modern epidemics. Okay, usually epidemics, it will last for a short it will have a high peak, and it will last for a short period of time. Now this HIV or AIDS, it is like it began as an epidemic and it is still continuing. So that is what it is considered as a slow or modern epidemics. Okay, so this is a picture showing the difference between what is an endemic and what is an epidemic. You all know what is an endemic and what is an epidemic. Okay, see the endemic, it is due to the constant pressure of something without its importation from an outside place. So you can see constant pressure of a disease agent. Okay, and what is an epidemic? Epidemic, it is like it is last for very short duration, and it will rise as like very minimal number of cases. Then it will have a peak, it suddenly increases and it reaches its peak, and then it starts to flatten its curve. That is what difference between an endemic and an epidemic. Okay, now we are moving on to periodic fluctuations. So it have two types, seasonal trend and cyclic trend. Okay, so seasonal trend means the seasonal variation of the disease occurs based on seasons. For example, varicella, that is chickenpox, and measles, these are most common seen in summer season. Okay, the non-infectious disease and conditions may sometimes exhibit seasonal variations. Okay, next we have cyclic trend. Okay, some cyclic trend is like some diseases, they occur in cyclics, they spread over a short period of time, maybe days, weeks, or months. Okay, so this cyclicity will they will act as a preventive measure. Okay, it will help the communities to defend themselves. For example, measles in the pre-vaccination era appeared in cycles with major peaks in every 2 to 3 years, and rubella in every 6 to 9 years. So they can already calculate, like if it happened in this 2016, it might happen in 2019 again, so that they can prevent, they can take preventive actions to defend. Okay, that is what cyclic trend. Okay, so now we have finished about what all things we have finished. We are learning the time distribution. So we have finished about short term fluctuations. Under that, we have learned about epidemics. Now we have finished about periodic fluctuation that have cyclic and seasonal trend. Now we are moving on to long term or secular trend. Okay, so the secular trend, what is a secular trend? Questions, they can ask a question. Okay, what is mean by a secular trend? Okay, so that is, remember, it is like a long term trends. Okay, it comes under descriptive epidemiology under time distribution. Okay, you should remember this. Okay, then the term secular trend implies changes in the occurrence of a disease over a long period of time, usually years or decades. Okay, it can be increase in the disease disease prevalence, or decrease in the disease prevalence. Okay, it implies a long term or a long term change. Okay, that is what secular trend means. Okay, that is changes in the occurrence of a disease, whether it can be increase or it can be a decrease, but it should be over a long period of time, that is over years or decades. Okay, for example, oral cancer is increasing. Okay, the trend of oral cancer is increasing, whereas tuberculosis is decreasing. Okay, that is what secular trend. Okay, it may have short-term fluctuations imposed on it. A secular trend implies a consistent tendency to change in a particular direction or a definite movement in one direction. Okay, so since ages oral cancer, the prevalence or incidence of oral cancer is increasing, and since ages the prevalence of TB is decreasing. So that is what secular trend means. Okay, now we are moving on to place. So time is over. Now we have place distribution. Okay, so place distribution is basically the study of the geography of the disease. Okay, so we have different variations, we have international variations. Okay, it is very clearly seen because the incidence of oral cancer is different in different countries. Okay, India is, I think, third among the world for the incidence, increased incidence of oral cancer. India and Bangladesh, the use of tobacco, the production of tobacco is very higher, so the oral cancer incidence will be definitely higher. And we have national variations, example goiter and fluorosis. It is not same everywhere. Those regions we have which have higher, or those regions under which fluoride belt is passing, those areas have higher fluoride content in the water, so they will have a fluorosis. And similarly goiter, high altitude regions have increased prevalence of goiter. That is what national variations. And rural and urban variations is like the skin infections and such kind of diseases is more prevalent among rural areas, whereas urban or high class people will be having more kind of bronchitis, like lifestyle diseases like chronic heart disease and all. Okay, then local variations is like we can see clustering of cases will be different among different community. That is what local variations mean. So that is about place distribution. So next we have, so under this place distribution, you should study about migration studies. Okay, so what is actually migration studies? It can be carried out in two ways. Like some group of people had come to our country. Okay, that is what migrants means. Okay, so we can compare the migrants with the local population of the host country. Okay, so some Egyptians had come, so we can compare the Egyptians with the local people. Okay, so that gives us you the information about two genetically different group living under a same community. They're genetically different, but they're living under same community. Okay, another comparison is like the difference in the disease or their health status or the death rates of migrants along with those of their kin who have stayed at home. Like some Egyptians had come and we are comparing with their relatives. So that is like we are comparing genetically similar groups but living under different environmental conditions or exposures. What is the difference in the health of the disease among the Egyptians who had come here and their relatives? So that is what migrant studies permit. So this is also comes under place distribution. Okay, I hope it is clear. Again, the last one is person distribution. So time, place, and person. So in descriptive studies, the disease is further categorized by defining the person who developed the disease by many factors. Okay, these are basically the determinants. Okay, I have already explained what is the determinants. That is age, stress, ethnicity, social class, behavior, sex, migration, occupation. All these are person dependent factors. In this, you have to more concentrate on age. See this word bimodal. Okay, this can be asked. Okay, the most fundamental factor to which consider when describing the disease occurrence is age. Okay, the most chronic diseases incidence increases with age, whereas infectious diseases incidence is highly seen in the childhood. Okay, some diseases show bimodal distribution. So what is bimodal? That disease has got two peak. Okay, it may reflect underlying etiologies. An example, while seeing an example, you will understand the bimodality of Hodgkin's diseases. Okay, so there is an increased peak of this Hodgkin's disease at an age of, see that x-axis is age. Okay, at an age of 29 to 30 years, there is an increased peak followed by again it went down, and then there was an again increased peak at 75, beyond 75 years. That is what this disease had shown to peak at the entire lifespan of a person. So that is what bimodality means. Okay, I hope it is clear. Okay, now what all things we have learned? We have learned about this definition of the population, definition of the disease, then describing the disease with respect to time, place, and person. And now we want to measure the disease. Okay, we have to quantify it. Okay, so it is very mandatory to have a clear picture of the amount of the disease in population. So we have the denominator, that is population number or composition we have. So we want the numerator, or we want to measure the disease frequency. Okay, the ultimate aim is to quantify everything and we want to express it in terms of frequencies or percentage. Okay, and the measurement is done in terms of mortality and morbidity, and you are very clear with the measurements of mortality and morbidity, right? Okay, so mortality is straightforward. Now n number of mortality rates we have, but the morbidity is using incidence and prevalence. Okay, again you're revising it. Okay, so incidence can be obtained from longitudinal studies and prevalence can be obtained from cross-sectional studies. Okay, so incidence, longitudinal studies, and prevalence through cross-sectional studies. Remember this by heart. Okay, this is everywhere this is asked. Okay, It is very easy to understand, but if you're finding it difficulty to understand, just by heart it. Okay. Incidence, longitudinal, cross sectional will give you prevalence or burden, because cross sectional is gives you what is prevalence. Prevalence is like existing current cases along with new cases. So that means you are finding, that is what prevalence means. Okay, so prevalence is given by cross section studies, but the new episodes or new spells of diseases we can find out by longitudinal, because it is kind of a follow up study. Okay, since we are following up, we can easily find out the new episodes of a disease. So that is what incidence will give you, or incidence can be obtained from longitudinal and prevalence can be obtained from cross sectional. Okay, the descriptive epidemiology may use a cross sectional or a longitudinal design to obtain the estimates of magnitude of health and disease problems in human population. Okay, so now let's study in detail the difference between cross-sectional and longitudinal studies. So let's move on to cross-sectional studies, otherwise known as prevalence studies. Okay, it is based on a single examination of a cross-section of population at one point in time. Okay, it is very important. Remember that word, at one point in time. Okay, and the results which can be projected onto the whole population, provided the sample has been done correctly. Okay, we are selecting a particular sample and we are evaluating them at that particular point, so that we can project the results to that whole population. So that is what cross-sectional studies means, and it is more useful to study chronic diseases. Since it is a prevalence study, and prevalence study, it is suited for chronic diseases, it is more useful to study chronic diseases than short-lived cases. Okay, so at that point of time, so we are checking their accumulated cases, accumulated amount of diseases. So always it will gives you the burden. Okay, that is what cross-sectional studies gives you. So it gives about the distribution of a disease in the population rather than its etiology. So as I told earlier, in descriptive studies, we are not analyzing the reason or not analyzing the factors causing the disease. We are just finding out the distribution of a disease in a population with respect to our study variables. So clear. So cross-sectional studies or prevalence studies, it is used for chronic cases. It will gives you the burden, and it is a study which is done using a single examination at that particular point of time. That is very important, at that particular point of time. Okay. So this is an example of a cross-section study. So before that, I'll tell you what is an exposure and an outcome. Exposure means something they have been exposed to, any kind of infectious agent or any kind of behavioral activities, that is like smoking, alcoholism or something. And a disease or outcome is what is the outcome of that exposure. Okay, always remember these two words, exposure and outcome. It will continuously come in the other slides. Okay, so this is a design of a cross-sectional study. Okay, we have a defined population. Okay, and we are gathering data on exposure and the outcome. That is what we are going to do. Okay, whether they have been exposed to something and what is their present condition. So similar example I'll tell you. We are analyzing, we want to find out the degree of dental caries in school children. So we are analyzing the outcome is dental caries, and we are asking for their exposure, that is their brushing habit. We have to ask. Okay, and their snacking, frequent snacking. Okay, these all is correlating with the exposure. No, these all things can leads to their desired outcome. So this exposure and outcome we have to analyze. Okay, and we'll get four groups, as in those who have uh, have the habit of frequent snacking with dental caries, that is exposed and have the disease. Okay, those who have, even though those who have other categories, even though those who have the habit of frequent snacking, they may not have dental caries. Another group. Okay, though they are not having the habit of frequent snacking, still they have the disease. That is a third group. Okay, and the fourth one is they are not having the habit of frequent snacking and they are not having dental caries. So we'll get four groups, and we are evaluating at that particular point of time. So today I'm going to a school and I'm evaluating the children, and I'll get the data like this, like four categories. Clear? That is what cross-sectional studies give. Okay, next we are moving on to longitudinal studies. Okay, now, what is the difference? The observations we are repeated in the same population over a prolonged time period by the means of follow-up examination. So, repeatedly we are checking. Okay, that is repeated observations on the same population for a particular period. That is through follow-up examinations. So, same example, I am checking the school children. Today I've gone and I've taken their data of the dental caries and I've categorized them as exposed, non-exposed and all. Okay, So today I have gone, then it will become a cross sectional study, and again I'm going and I'm checking at third month, and I'm checking at sixth month, and I'm checking at 12th month. So it will be a 1 year follow up study. Then I'm checking on the school children, that is the same population, at repeated intervals of time, that is through follow up examination. Then it will become a longitudinal study. Understood the difference? That is what a cross sectional longitudinal study differs. Okay, so this longitudinal study is useful to study the natural history of the disease and its future outcomes. Okay, so we can easily understand what is the exact reason behind this disease. That is, we're following them up for a certain period of time, right? And what is the future outcome? And also, it is useful to find out the risk factors for the disease. Okay, and also to find out the incidence rate, since we are checking them for a certain period of time through follow-up examinations, we can easily get the new spells of the disease or the new disease that has been occurring in that particular community. So it is very useful to assess the incidence. So longitudinal studies will give you the incidence, whereas cross-sectional studies will give you the prevalence. Clear? Okay, this is an example comparing cross-sectional and longitudinal data. X-axis is the year of examination, y-axis is the age groups. Okay, so first see in 1965. Okay, you can see that cross-sectional data, no, one arrow mark you can see, right? Okay, in 1965, okay, the people belonging to 25 years, 35 years, 30 years, 40 years, 45 years, they are examined at at a particular time point, that is in the year 1965. All these people are examined in the year 1965. C, D, E, F, G doesn't matter. So they are all examined at that particular point of time. So it will fit into a cross sectional data. That is in 1965. Clear? Doesn't matter if they are belonging to different age group, doesn't matter they are belonging to different categories. This A, B, C, D and all, you just imagine it as different groups or different individuals. Okay, so different individuals belonging to different age groups, but they are evaluated at the same point of time, that is in the year 1965. So that particular scenario will become a cross sectional study. Okay, so you have plenty number of questions will be like, they will given like long sentences. They have been examined at this year, that year and all. Just catch the word or just look for the word at that particular point of time or in that particular period. Okay, then it will become a cross sectional study. That is the highlight. Okay, then see a longitudinal data. Okay, what is a longitudinal data here? See that E and F arrow a line you can see dome. So the same people, that is E, they are examined at different time points in 1955, 1960, 65, 70. So the same group of people are examined at different time points, that is different follow-up period is there. So that data will come as a longitudinal data. Similarly F also. Okay, then another example is like 30-year-old. Okay, so they are the same group of people, the 30-year-old. Okay, so longitudinal study is otherwise known as cohort study, because cohort is a group of people who share a similar characteristic. So in the 30-year-old people means they are similar with respect to age. Okay, so that 30-year-old people, they are examined at successive years in 55, 60, 65, 70, 75. Okay, so there is one common thing and they are examined at different time points. So that will become a longitudinal data. Okay, and I hope it is very clear about cross-sectional longitudinal studies. Okay, so we have finished the measurement of the disease. So that was the last part. Now we are moving to other types of studies, that is ecological study. So what is an ecological study? So here I have already told the unit of observation is a population or an aggregate. Okay, for example, family, school children, or an ecological unit like a village or town, or a hue, or a single country, or an ethnic group, like that. They're also called as correlation studies or ecologic fallacy or atomistic fallacy. So just understand this, what is an ecological study. Okay, next we have learned about another study design, no? Under descriptive study, that is case report and case series. Let me explain you what is a case report. It is a report of a rare clinical presentation or a new procedure or any treatment strategy of a single patient by one or more clinicians. Okay, so it is a report of a rare clinical presentation, okay, or a new procedure, anything which can be new, okay, or the treatment strategy. by a clinician or a group of clinicians. Okay, usually it is a report of unusual treatment complications. So usually it is a report of a case which has been a rare kind of a disease, or a rare kind of a treatment, or rare kind of treatment complications. So that is what case report. And case series is a series of case reports of a specific condition or particular treatment or observation with no specifically allocated control group. There is no control group, it is just a series of case reports of specific conditions or a particular treatment or any kind of observation. So that is what case series means. So clear. So we have finished case report, case series, then ecological studies and cross-sectional studies. So that descriptive studies categories we have finished now. Okay. So that measurement of disease is completed now. The next step is we have to compare it with the non-indices. Measurements in steps in descriptive epidemiology. We have finished measurements of the disease. Next we have got a we have got a quantity. Now we have the quantity of the disease in our hand. Now we have to compare it with the non-indices. Okay. So epidemiology is all about comparison, right? And asking questions. So by making comparison, it is possible to arrive at clues to the disease etiology. Okay. Then the groups which are at increased risk of certain diseases can be identified by this method of comparison. So we already have some non-indices, and we have to compare the data or the quantified or the measured of the disease which we have obtained with the non-indices, so that we can identify the uh, diseases, or we can identify high risk groups, okay, or the people who are having an increased risk of chance of getting the disease. That is what comparing with known indices means. And the last step is formulation of an etiological hypothesis. This is the very important step and the last step of a descriptive epidemiology. So hypothesis is a supposition arrived from observation or a reflection. So that is the definition of a hypothesis. But you should remember what all things should a hypothesis contain. It should have a population. It should have a specific cause. And it should contain the expected outcome and the dose response relationship and the time response relationship. So all these factors or all these parts should be there in while writing a hypothesis. So after doing all these studies, we have to give our hypothesis, right? So when we are writing, we should mention the population, the cause, the outcome, the dose response relationship, and the time response relationship. Okay, I'll show you. For example, cigarette smoking causes lung cancer. It is an incomplete hypothesis. Okay, because dose is not there. The response dose response relationship is not there, the time response relationship is not there, so it is an incomplete hypothesis. The better or the complete hypothesis is the smoking of 30 to 40 cigarettes per day causes lung cancer in 10% of smokers after 20 years of exposure. See here, everything is there. Exposure is there, outcome is there, population is there, dose response, time response relationship, everything is there. So this is a complete hypothesis. So hypothesis, formulation of a hypothesis, it is the last step in a descriptive epidemiology. Okay. So what are the uses of descriptive epidemiology? It provides data regarding the magnitude of the disease load. It provides clues to disease etiology for formulation of a hypothesis. Provide background data for planning, evaluation, and preventive and curative services, and contribute to research by describing the variation. So at last, we'll get a hypothesis, and we want to test for the hypothesis by using another higher study designs. That is what we are going to learn in the another session. So this is all about descriptive epidemiology. Thank you.